What if the richest woman in town had everything money could buy, but no one left to care if she lived or died? One snowy night, a billionaire widow collapsed in her empty mansion. Her children were too busy to answer the phone. The lights went out, the silence grew louder, and only a lonely dog barked across the fence. But sometimes, God sends his angels not from heaven, but from next door. This is a story about how love can bring life back where hope had died. Tell us in the comments, have you ever been saved by someone unexpected? Your story might remind someone that kindness still exists. The wind howled through the white streets of Aspen, Colorado, carrying with it the hush of winter and the ache of solitude. Inside a grand stone mansion that once hosted laughter and holiday dinners, Eleanor Montgomery, 76 and widowed for 2 years, sat alone in an armchair by the frosted window. The fire in the hearth had long since dimmed, leaving only the faint hum of the heater and the steady ticking of a clock that seemed too loud for the silence it occupied. She wore a thick wool shawl her late husband, Henry, had bought on their 50th anniversary trip to Vermont. Its edges were frayed now, the scent of cedar long gone. The old woman's fingers traced the embroidered initials, E and H, stitched near the corner, and for a moment she could almost feel the weight of his arm around her shoulders again. "You always get cold too easily," he used to tease, wrapping her in blankets until she laughed. But laughter had grown rare here. Eleanor looked toward the hallway, where portraits of her family lined the walls like a museum of distant memories. Her son, Michael, a financial executive in New York. Her daughter, Laura, a designer in Los Angeles. And 2 grandchildren she had only seen on video calls. She tried calling them that morning. Both had answered with the same apologetic tone. "I'm in a meeting, Mom. Can I call you later?" Later never came. The wind rattled the shutters, and a small tremor of pain rippled through Eleanor's chest. She pressed her palm there, steadying her breath. "Just a twinge," she murmured to herself, as though saying it softly could make it less real. The doctor had warned her. Heart arrhythmia, fragile vessels, keep warm, avoid stress. But how could she avoid what had already settled inside her? The heavy kind of loneliness that medicine couldn't touch. From the window, she saw a different kind of life beyond her gate. Across the snowy street, the Miller family was out in the yard, building a snowman beneath a halo of golden light spilling from their modest home. Tom Miller, a mechanic, laughed as his little girl, Lily, placed a crooked carrot nose onto the snowman's face, while his wife Grace clapped her mittened hands in delight. Their dog, a large German shepherd named Rex, ran circles around them, barking at the flurries like they were a game invented just for him. Eleanor watched in silence, her lips curving upward despite herself. There was warmth in that laughter, the kind that could melt even the cruelest winter. She thought of her own children again, their clean, polished lives, their expensive coats, their well-timed absences. She wondered when they'd stop needing her, or perhaps when she'd stop fitting into the schedule of their lives. She leaned closer to the glass, breath fogging it slightly. The Miller's house wasn't much, its paint peeling, roof patched. But the light inside seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Rex suddenly looked up, his sharp eyes meeting hers across the fence. For an instant, she felt exposed, as if the dog could see straight into her quiet ache. Then he wagged his tail once and barked, low and friendly. Eleanor smiled, a real, unguarded smile that surprised her with its warmth. As night deepened, the snow thickened, swirling like ghosts outside her window. The sky was the color of pewter, heavy with unshed tears. Eleanor reached for the framed photo on the side table. Henry in his old navy coat, smiling at her with that gentle stubbornness she missed every day. "You'd laugh at me, wouldn't you?" she whispered, "sitting here talking to shadows." Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from Michael. "Hope you're keeping warm, Mom. We'll visit soon." She read it twice, then turned off the screen. She knew what soon meant. It meant never. Not really. The pain in her chest returned, sharper this time, radiating down her arm. She steadied herself, stood slowly, and shuffled toward the kitchen for her pills. The hallway lights flickered once, then steadied. She passed the mirror by the stairwell and caught sight of her reflection, a small, fragile woman in a large, silent house. "You look like a ghost," she muttered. Outside, the miller's laughter had faded. The snowman stood finished, crooked hat and all, while Rex trotted back toward their porch. Through the drifting snow, Eleanor could see Grace hanging a string of lights along the eaves, warm and golden like a heartbeat against the cold. She reached for her medicine bottle, her hand trembling slightly. The pills rattled against the plastic. One rolled to the floor, spinning until it disappeared beneath the cabinet. Eleanor sighed and leaned down, perhaps too fast, to retrieve it. The pain flared again, a sharp flash, then dizziness. The world tilted. Somewhere in the distance, she thought she heard Rex barking again, louder this time, an echo through the storm. She fumbled for her phone, pressing the screen. It slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. The heater hummed, the wind screamed, and a single photograph, Henry's smiling face, fell from the table, landing face down on the carpet. Then, just outside the window, came a sudden thud, a sound muffled by snow but deep enough to make Rex bark wildly from across the street. Inside the mansion, the light in the window flickered once, then went out. The miller's small house sat across from Eleanor Montgomery's grand estate, its windows glowing with the amber warmth of a modest life. Snow pressed against the glass, soft and relentless. But inside, there was laughter. Tom Miller, a man of broad shoulders and gentle eyes, was showing his children how to knead dough on the kitchen counter. Grace, his wife, moved gracefully between the oven and the sink, humming a hymn under her breath while the smell of cinnamon filled the air. For a family that had little, they had everything that mattered: warmth, noise, and the comfort of one another's company. The walls, though thin, held stories of resilience. Tom had been laid off twice that year, yet still found ways to fix broken heaters for neighbors without charge. Grace, once a nurse's aide, now baked pies to sell at the weekend market. They believed in small kindnesses. Outside, the storm had begun to gather strength. The wind moaned around the eaves, scattering flakes like shards of glass. The lights flickered once, and the youngest, Emma, squeaked in surprise. Tom chuckled and ruffled her hair. The storm's just saying hello. Then came the sound, a bark, sharp and insistent. Rex, their German shepherd, had risen from his spot near the door, ears pricked, body tense. His growl wasn't playful this time. Grace turned, frowning. "Tom, he never barks like that." Tom looked toward the window. Across the street, through the curtain of snow, the mansion stood in darkness. No warm light in the front room, no flicker of life from the upstairs windows. Only the faint echo of wind. Rex whined, pawing at the door. "Maybe the old heater's gone out," Grace murmured. But something in her chest stirred, an unease that no logic could quiet. "She's all alone there, Tom." Tom hesitated only a second before grabbing his coat. "Stay with the kids. I'll just go check." Grace shook her head, already pulling on her boots. No, you'll need help if she's fallen. Within moments, they were out in the storm, Rex leading the way. Snow bit at their faces, their breaths visible in the frigid air. The gates to Eleanor's property were half open, creaking against the wind. "Mrs. Montgomery?" Tom called out, his voice swallowed by the blizzard. No answer. The porch light swung on its hinge, faint and dying. Grace's gloved hand pushed against the door. It wasn't locked. Cold air spilled out like a sigh. Inside, the grand hall loomed in shadows. The floor glittered faintly with frost. Rex barked once, then darted toward the living room. They found her there. Eleanor collapsed beside the window, one hand still reaching toward the fallen phone. Her lips were pale, her shawl slipped from her shoulders. The photograph of her husband lay cracked beneath her. Grace dropped to her knees, fingers trembling as she checked for a pulse. It was there, faint, uneven. "She's alive," she breathed. "Tom, call 911. Tom's frozen hands fumbled with his phone. The signal crackled, breaking between gusts of wind. "No service," he muttered. "We'll have to take her ourselves." Grace nodded, wrapping Eleanor in her coat. Rex whined, circling them anxiously as Tom lifted the frail woman into his arms. She was light, frighteningly so, like carrying the shadow of a life. Outside, their truck was half buried in snow. But Tom didn't pause. He placed Eleanor gently in the back seat, covering her with blankets while Grace climbed in beside her, whispering words of comfort that trembled through the cold. The drive to the hospital was a battle. Snow slashed against the windshield, the tires skidding more than once. Tom's hands gripped the wheel until his knuckles blanched. Grace held Eleanor's hand, rubbing it to keep the blood moving. The woman's skin was icy, her breath shallow. "Stay with us, Mrs. Montgomery," Grace pleaded. "You're going to be okay. We're almost there." Eleanor stirred faintly. Her eyes fluttered open for the briefest second. She saw Grace's face. Soft, frightened, kind. The sort of face that doesn't belong to a stranger anymore. Her lips parted, but only a whisper escaped, barely a breath. "Don't. Let me die alone." Grace squeezed her hand tighter. "You won't. I promise." The siren of the approaching ambulance wailed through the snow, distant but growing. The storm raged on, but inside that truck, there was a fragile warmth, a promise held between two women, one fighting for breath, one fighting to keep her alive. And as the red light sliced through the white darkness, Rex howled into the wind, his voice echoing down the street like a call that would change all their lives. The sterile brightness of Aspen Valley Hospital swallowed all sense of time. Machines beeped in careful rhythm. Nurses moved softly through corridors washed in white light. And outside, snow continued to fall. Slow, deliberate, endless. On the bed in room 204, Eleanor Montgomery drifted in and out of consciousness, her breath shallow, her skin pale against the hospital sheets. A thin tube ran along her arm, delivering life drop by drop. When she woke for the first time, the world seemed blurred at the edges. Her right hand would not move. It lay limp on the blanket like something that no longer belonged to her. Panic stirred in her chest, followed by shame for feeling afraid. "You've survived worse," she whispered to herself, though she couldn't remember when that had last been true. A young doctor leaned over her, checking her pulse. "Mrs. Montgomery, you're in the hospital. You had a minor stroke," he said gently. "You'll need rest and time. You're a lucky woman. The family that brought you here probably saved your life." The words landed slowly. "The family that brought you here." She tried to recall. A face in the storm, a woman's trembling hands, a voice saying, "You won't die alone." Then darkness again. When she woke next, the clock read 2 a.m. Outside her door sat Grace Miller, wrapped in a hospital blanket, her head nodding in exhaustion. In her lap was a paper cup of cold coffee. Tom was asleep in the waiting area, his arm draped protectively over little Lily, who had curled up beside him. And near the door, Rex lay quietly, chin on his paws, eyes never leaving the room. Eleanor watched them for a long time through the glass panel in the door. She couldn't recall the last time someone had waited for her, not for money, not for inheritance, but simply because they cared. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. The glow of the screen cut through the dim light. Michael. Mom, heard you're at Aspen Hospital. So sorry. Want to come visit, but meetings all week. Get well soon. Laura. Mom, just found out. I'll send flowers. Hang in there, okay? Love you. She stared at the messages until the screen dimmed. Love you. The words felt like receipts for feelings never delivered. She turned the phone face down and closed her eyes. Her mind wandered back to the dream, the one that had haunted her since she was brought in. Snowfields stretching endless and quiet. Henry standing there in his navy coat, smiling with that patient kindness that always felt like home. He reached for her hand. When the heart stops chasing money, he said softly, it finally remembers how to find people. She had woken crying. The nurses came and went, adjusting tubes, checking vitals. They whispered respectfully around the Miller family, who refused to leave. Grace read aloud softly from a worn paperback she'd found in the waiting room. Something about the power of kindness. Her voice, though, tired, carried warmth. Eleanor listened, pretending to sleep. Each word seemed to thread through the sterile air, weaving comfort where medicine could not reach. By morning, the doctor returned with cautious optimism. Your recovery looks promising, Mrs. Montgomery, he said. But there's partial paralysis on your right side. We'll need physiotherapy, and you must avoid stress. That means... Eleanor smiled faintly. That means not reading my children's messages. He blinked, unsure if it was a joke. But she wasn't smiling anymore. After he left, Grace came in quietly with a tray, porridge, warm tea, and a small card drawn by Lily. The picture was of a snowman holding hands with a smiling lady. Get well soon, Miss Eleanor. Written in shaky crayon letters. Eleanor's lips trembled. You didn't have to. We wanted to, Grace said simply, arranging the pillows. Rex misses you. He's been guarding your door all night. The nurses tried to move him, but he growled at anyone who came close. A weak laugh escaped Eleanor's throat. He's loyal. Grace nodded. He likes you. We all do. Something inside Eleanor broke then. Not in pain, but in release. Tears slid silently down her face, the kind that had waited too long to fall. Grace reached for her good hand, holding it gently until the trembling subsided. No one said a word. Outside, the sun had begun to rise over the white hills of Aspen. The light entered the room, pale and tender, washing away the night. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt the warmth of morning not as another day to endure, but as something fragile worth reaching for. Rex lifted his head, tail thumping once against the floor. The nurses smiled as they passed. That dog hasn't slept all night, one said softly. By noon, the room smelled of tea and soap. Grace dozed in the chair, and Lily whispered to Rex, tracing circles in his fur. Eleanor watched them, a small, ordinary family wrapped in extraordinary kindness, and felt her breath settle into a calmer rhythm. Her right hand still wouldn't move. But in her left, she felt the pulse of something she'd thought long gone. Belonging. The morning Eleanor returned home, Aspen was bathed in fragile sunlight, that quiet, golden kind that melts the edges of the snow. The world seemed washed clean, the air thin but alive. Her driver parked slowly by the iron gate, and as the car door opened, the familiar cold brushed her cheek like a shy greeting. She hesitated for a moment, cane trembling slightly in her hand, before taking her first step toward the mansion she had once thought she might never see again. The house stood as it always had, tall, dignified and silent. But there was something different in the air. The emptiness that had once pressed against the walls now felt softer, like it was waiting to be filled. At her side, Grace Miller carried a small basket of bread, wrapped in a checkered cloth, still warm from the oven. Behind her, Tom guided Lily and Emma, who were trying to balance a pot of flowers between them, their cheeks pink from the cold. Rex bounded ahead, tail wagging, as though he knew this was no longer a house of silence, but of second chances. His paws left prints on the marble floor as he trotted inside, barking once, a bright, confident sound that echoed off the walls and made Eleanor laugh for the first time in weeks. They settled into a rhythm as if it had always been meant to happen. Grace moved through the kitchen with the easy grace of someone who didn't need to be told where things belonged. The smell of butter and cinnamon soon filled the halls, blending with the faint scent of old wood and polish. Lily's laughter rippled through the rooms as she and Emma explored the long corridors, their footsteps like music in the quiet mansion. Eleanor sat in her favorite armchair by the window, a blanket draped over her lap. Her cane rested beside her, and Rex lay at her feet, occasionally nudging her good hand with his nose. The world outside glittered with light. She could see Tom in the yard clearing snow from the pathway, his movement steady, rhythmic. A man working not for money, but from simple goodness. Every morning after breakfast, she practiced walking down the hallway, one slow, deliberate step at a time. Rex stayed close, watching her with those patient eyes that seemed to believe in her more than she believed in herself. Grace would cheer softly whenever Eleanor made it to the end of the corridor. "See, you're getting stronger," she'd say. And Eleanor, though exhausted, would smile back. At first, her movements were hesitant, her right leg dragging slightly, her hand trembling on the cane. But with each passing day, something shifted. The stiffness began to fade. She could feel warmth returning to muscles that had lain dormant for months. Doctors had told her recovery might take years, that damage to the body often mirrored damage to the heart. Yet here, in this house now filled with laughter and life, healing no longer felt impossible. Each afternoon, Lily would sit cross-legged beside Eleanor's chair and read poems she picked from the school library. Her small voice carried through the air like the sound of spring water, clear, innocent, and full of hope. Sometimes Eleanor would close her eyes, letting the rhythm of the child's reading wash over her like a lullaby. In the evenings, Grace cooked simple meals, soups, roasted vegetables, bread baked fresh each day. The table, once too long and lonely for one person, now seemed almost small with everyone gathered around it. Tom would tell stories from his time working in the mines. Lily would laugh at things that weren't funny. And even Rex seemed to join in, resting his head on Eleanor's lap and sighing with contentment. There were moments when Eleanor felt overwhelmed by it all, by the warmth, by the noise, by the sheer miracle of being alive. She had spent so long building walls of marble and silence that she'd forgotten what it meant to be touched by life. Now, every sound, every giggle, every bark, every clatter of dishes felt like proof that the house was breathing again. One night, as she sat near the fireplace with Grace and the children, the flames casting gold across their faces, Eleanor caught herself watching them, not as guests, but as family. Lily was rubbing ointment into her arm, small hands determined, whispering, "You're getting better, Miss Eleanor." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I think I am," she said softly. Outside, snowflakes drifted down, slow and silent. The world beyond the windows seemed vast and unreachable. But within these walls, everything had narrowed to something pure. Warmth, kindness, connection. When she finally went to bed, Rex followed her to the doorway, curling up by the side like a sentinel. Lying there in the half-dark, Eleanor stared at the ceiling and thought about how strange it was. How a stranger's kindness had done what medicine could not. Her body was still weak, her heart still fragile. But somewhere deep inside, something had awakened. A quiet current of faith pulsing through her veins. She whispered into the stillness, "Thank you, Henry, for sending them to me." And in the hush that followed, the old house seemed to sigh, not with loneliness this time, but with life. The first snow of February came without warning, brushing the pine trees of Aspen in slow, patient swirls. Inside the mansion, the fire hummed quietly while Eleanor sat in her armchair, wrapped in a knitted shawl. Her recovery had been steady, each day a small triumph. But that morning, her pulse was uneasy. The phone had rung 3 times before she dared to answer. "Mom?" Michael's voice came sharp and hurried. "Laura and I are flying in tonight. We heard about your condition." Eleanor's eyes drifted toward the window, where Rex lay curled beside the fire. "My condition?" she asked softly. "I'm recovering, Michael. Not dying." "Well," he cleared his throat. "A neighbor told us things have changed. We thought we should check in." "Of course," Eleanor replied, her voice even, but her heart trembled. She knew what this meant. News traveled fast in small towns, and rumors faster. Perhaps someone had mentioned that she'd met with a lawyer again. Perhaps her children finally remembered that she existed. That evening, the hum of a car broke the calm. 2 sleek black coats stepped into the snow. Michael, tall and impatient, carried a phone in one hand and a designer briefcase in the other. Laura followed close behind, her perfume filling the air before her words did. "Mother," she exclaimed, stepping forward with an exaggerated smile. "You look, well, considering." Eleanor offered her hand. "And you look exactly the same, dear, beautiful and late." They entered the warm living room, where Grace was just finishing dinner preparations. The smell of rosemary chicken filled the air. Grace smiled politely, then excused herself, sensing the tension before a word was spoken. Lily peeked around the corner before Tom gently guided her upstairs. Once they were alone, Michael leaned back on the sofa, scanning the room as if appraising it. "You've been keeping busy," he remarked. "New faces around, I hear." "Friends," Eleanor corrected. "Good ones." Laura's painted nails tapped on her knee. "Mother, we understand you've been close to that family across the street. The Millers? They've been kind to me," Eleanor said. "When I was in the hospital, they were there every day." "Of course," Laura said, her smile thin. "People like that know how to make themselves useful, especially when they see opportunity." Eleanor's stomach tightened. "Opportunity?" Michael shifted forward, lowering his voice. "Mom, we need to talk about your will. We've heard you changed it." The air froze between them. Eleanor folded her hands on her lap, steady and deliberate. "I did," she said quietly. "The old one no longer fits the life I live." Laura's mask cracked first. "You mean you've given everything to strangers?" she hissed. "People who baked you pies and played nurse for a few weeks?" Eleanor felt her heartbeat calm, not rise. Years of silence had prepared her for this moment. "They gave me more than that," she said. "They gave me time, warmth, laughter, things I never realized I'd lost." Michael stood, pacing near the mantel. "Mother, you're not thinking clearly. You've always been generous to a fault. You're being manipulated." Eleanor's gaze sharpened, steady as the flame. "If kindness is manipulation, then I welcome it. Tell me, Michael, when did you last visit me before the hospital?" He faltered. Work's been... And you, Laura?" Eleanor turned to her daughter. "When was the last time you called? Not for money, not for favors, but just to ask how I slept." Laura's lips parted, then closed again. The silence that followed was heavy enough to hear the ticking clock on the mantelpiece. "I've spent 2 years waiting for a call that never came," Eleanor continued, her voice soft but piercing. "Now that I'm alive, you show up like mourners rehearsing early." "Mother," Laura whispered, tears filling her eyes, not from sorrow, but from fury. "You're being unfair." Eleanor smiled faintly. "If you truly loved me, my dear, why must I be sick to see you?" That question lingered, cruel in its truth. Michael turned away, his jaw tightening. Laura stood abruptly, grabbing her coat. "This is madness," she said. "You'll regret this." "I already regret wasting so many years believing distance was love," Eleanor replied. The front door opened with a gust of wind. The siblings left without another word, their footsteps swallowed by the snow. When silence returned, it was not empty. Grace appeared quietly from the kitchen doorway, eyes uncertain. "Are you all right, Mrs. Montgomery?" Eleanor nodded, though her voice trembled. "Yes, Grace. Let them go. The storm will calm." Rex lifted his head and patted over, resting it gently on her lap. His eyes, deep and knowing, met hers. She stroked his fur with her good hand, feeling the slow rhythm of his breath. Outside, the snow fell harder, each flake blurring the world into white. Inside, the fire glowed steady, and the old woman whispered to the dog, "At least you stayed." Rex answered with a quiet sigh, and together they sat in the stillness, the sound of love unspoken, but deeply understood. The sky over Aspen was soft that morning, painted in faint strokes of lavender and gold. A fragile peace lingered after weeks of storms. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the world quiet, as though nature itself was holding its breath. Inside the Montgomery estate, the fire still glowed in the hearth, casting light upon the restored warmth of a once frozen home. Eleanor Montgomery stood in the doorway, cane in hand, gazing out toward the garden. Beyond the frost-coated glass lay the rose garden she and Henry had planted decades ago. Even in winter, the bare stems stood stubbornly upright, defying the cold. She had not walked among them since the funeral. Her heart and her body had not allowed it. Today, something inside her whispered, "Go." Grace noticed the look in her eyes and smiled. "It's a good day to try the garden, Mrs. Montgomery. The path's clear enough." Eleanor nodded, her breath clouding the air. Perhaps Henry's roses deserve a visit. Rex bounded ahead as she stepped onto the snow-dusted path. The cold bit at her cheeks, but it no longer frightened her. Her left hand clutched the cane, her right, once limp and useless, now hovered just slightly at her side, trembling but alive. Each step through the snow crunched softly, a rhythm of determination. Halfway down the path, she paused, the air sharp with pine and silence. The wind moved through the rose bushes, shaking loose tiny flakes of ice that glittered like dust. For a heartbeat, she could almost hear music. The low hum of Henry's laughter carried faintly in the breeze. Her heart quickened. The pain that once signaled fear now felt like warmth. "Henry," she whispered. "Is that you?" The wind seemed to answer. A swirl of sound, soft, familiar, tender. The world tilted just enough for her to feel both grounded and lifted, as though the earth and sky had briefly touched. A sudden rush of warmth bloomed in her chest. Her fingers tingled, her right arm twitching with the faintest spark of movement. Behind her, Grace gasped. "Mrs. Montgomery, your hand." Eleanor looked down. Her right hand, pale and trembling, was opening. Slowly, stubbornly, like a bud fighting its way toward the sun. She stared in disbelief, then laughter bubbled from her lips. Light, unrestrained, alive. "I can feel it," she said softly. "I can feel again." Grace ran to her, tears bright in her eyes. "Oh my God, that's wonderful." But Eleanor only smiled, her gaze distant, fixed on the horizon. "He's here," she said simply. "He's always been." Rex barked once, a joyful sound, and the noise echoed through the stillness like applause. The sunlight spilled through the clouds, striking the snow in shards of gold. The garden, once a graveyard of frozen blooms, seemed to shimmer, each branch holding the memory of spring. Grace stood beside her, awed. "It's a miracle." Eleanor shook her head gently. "No, Grace. Science might call it nerve recovery. Doctors might call it progress. But what I feel," she pressed her revived hand over her heart, "is something medicine can't explain. It's love finding its way home." For the first time in years, she walked without counting her breaths, without fearing the next step. The wind brushed her hair, lifting the silver strands like a benediction. She felt lighter, not healed by pills or therapy, but by faith, kindness, and the laughter of children that had filled her empty halls. When they reached the garden's edge, she stopped beneath the archway, where Henry once proposed to her. The snow sparkled there like a veil, and she imagined him standing just beyond it, smiling, waiting. "I thought I'd lost everything," she whispered. "But maybe you just sent them to bring me back." Rex pressed his nose to her leg, tail wagging gently. Grace wiped her cheeks. "He'd be proud of you," she said softly. Eleanor turned toward the house. The windows glowed warm against the pale sky. Inside, she could hear Lily laughing, Emma singing to herself, and Tom calling something from the kitchen. Life had found its way back, not through miracles of medicine, but through the quiet, everyday grace of love. She took one last look at the roses buried beneath the snow. "We'll see them bloom again soon," she whispered. Then, with a deep breath and steady step, she began the slow walk back home. Each movement sure, confident, filled with light. Behind her, the winter wind stirred the garden once more, carrying with it the faintest echo of a man's laughter and the promise of spring. Spring crept quietly over Aspen, as though heaven itself was holding its breath. The snow began to melt in soft trickles along the eaves of the Montgomery mansion, uncovering earth that had been hidden too long. Eleanor Montgomery sat by the window, her lap covered with a wool blanket, watching the first green tips of her roses pushing through the thawing soil. When Mr. Dawson, her lawyer, arrived that afternoon, the air in the study felt lighter than usual. Grace brewed tea while Rex lay contentedly by the fire. On the polished mahogany desk rested the final version of Eleanor's will. "Mrs. Montgomery," Dawson began gently, "everything is ready for your signature. Are you certain of your decision?" Eleanor smiled faintly. I've never been more certain of anything. It's time my fortune served life, not vanity. She signed the papers with a calm, deliberate hand. The sound of the pen gliding across the page seemed to echo through the quiet house like a hymn. 1/3 of your estate, Dawson read, is designated for the Miller family. Grace interrupted softly. Mrs. Montgomery, we've talked about this. Tom and I can't accept that. Eleanor looked up, puzzled. Can't. You've earned it, Grace. You saved my life. Grace stepped forward, voice trembling but steady. That's why we can't. You've given us enough already. Trust, friendship, and a home that feels like family. We've talked it over, and we'd like to donate our share to the Winter Hill Sanctuary Fund. Let it help more people like you. People who once felt forgotten. For a moment, Eleanor couldn't speak. The fire crackled softly between them, and Rex lifted his head as though sensing something sacred. Tears shimmered in Eleanor's eyes. You would give back what I meant to give you? Grace nodded, because it was never about the money. It was about meaning. Mr. Dawson adjusted his glasses, visibly moved. Then we'll amend the clause to reflect the Miller family's donation to the sanctuary. Eleanor reached for Grace's hand, her touch firm and warm. You've taught me something, my dear. That kindness multiplies when it refuses to keep count. Later that week, preparations for Winter Hill Sanctuary began. Tom supervised the renovations, Lily and Emma painted wooden signs, and Grace met with volunteers. The mansion no longer echoed with loneliness. It pulsed with purpose. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon bread, the garden hummed with laughter, and the halls that once held silence now held life. On the day the first residents arrived, an old teacher, a retired postman, a gentle widow with a blind beagle, Eleanor stood at the door to greet them. She looked frail, yes, but radiant. Behind her, the family that had once saved her stood together, smiling. That evening, as twilight fell and the last snow melted from the garden, Eleanor wrapped herself in her shawl and sat on the porch with Rex. The roses would soon bloom again. She whispered toward the fading light, Henry, it's done. Our home has found its purpose. Rex rested his head on her lap. She stroked his fur slowly, feeling the pulse of his steady heartbeat beneath her hand. I was healed by love, she murmured, and love must now heal others. The stars began to appear, one by one, like promises kept. Eleanor closed her eyes, a soft smile touching her lips. Now, I am truly at peace. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive with thunder or light. They come quietly, through a neighbor's knock, a dog's loyalty, or the warmth of a stranger's hand. In a world that rushes past pain, love still waits in small corners, ready to heal what medicine cannot. Maybe God's greatest miracles are not found in the heavens, but in the hearts that choose to care again and again. And perhaps that's all faith really is, believing that kindness still matters, even when no one sees. If this story touched something inside you, share it. Leave a comment about someone who once showed you unexpected kindness. Subscribe to help us spread these stories of healing and hope. May God bless you, guide your steps, and remind you every day. No act of love is ever wasted.